Go ask your favorite instructor or influencer who says an LPVO is slower than a red dot the last time they shot a rifle match. All right, so let's cover a pretty interesting topic that pops up way too often. Are LPVOs slower than a red dot? The answer is no. So it's a super common belief that for whatever reason, and there's a few of them, that an LPVO is going to be slower to shoot, to do other stuff than a red dot when it's on 1x. We're not going to be talking any sort of magnification difference, but just 1x on an LPVO versus your run-of-the-mill red dot, EOTech, aim points, and those kind of pattern dots, right? Why do people think an LPVO is slower? Most of the time it's because when they get behind the optic, they can't find where they need to be right away. A red dot is pretty intuitive to get behind and then, get your dot where it needs to be and go. With an LPVO, if you're not perfectly behind it or within the margins, right, you're gonna wind up with scope shadow. And then you're gonna have to shift, get where you need to be, adjust stock placement, adjust cheek weld placement, all of that sort of stuff to start shooting, or you're gonna be shooting with, half a sight picture because you've got black and then a little bit of the reticle. That is where a lot of people begin to process, oh, it's slower. No, you just suck, right? To be blunt. You suck in regards of you can't get your body where it needs to be on the gun to do what you need to do, right? A red dot is a little more forgiving, like I said, in that you can kind of fish your way in and you're not getting that scope shadow, which winds up fucking with people. And, they see that, they start shifting in the wrong direction and whatnot, and then just adding time to the clock. With a red dot, they kind of concede at like the bottom of the window if they're not, perfectly behind the gun, the side of the window, what have you, and still make shots and then adjust in the process. They're still fucking up their placement, but they're still able to shoot with it, rather than if you're a little off here, they may have to wait to shoot, right? So that perception of it's slower creeps in. But if you do this thing called actually train, right, it's fairly consistent, right? There's zero, if you're nailing the spot all the time, which you should be if you're actually training, right, is an LPVO like this Vortex 1-6 Razor has a wide enough margin back of it that I'm not really going to be off if I've got a good connection, right? I've got from here to here to here to here to here, right, that I can kind of play with. Stock placement wise, like if I'm over here, I can still get a picture. From here, a little too far in, I can get a picture, right? A little up, I can still get a picture, and all of that, right? So I can still make it work and still shoot. It's when you're just egregiously off, or just a little off and then wind up trying to correct it, that problems start to arise and time starts to get added to the clock. So this myth, right? It comes from people who suck but still somehow have had enough of a platform to put forth this information into the general zeitgeist of the shooting community. Budget Botkin, prime example, right? The dude who's now doing T-Rex stuff, he did a video a while back that had a ton of views and was saying this. He even did demos, right? And just kind of showed that he sucks at shooting, which he does. That's a separate video that we'll get to at some point. That'll be fun. But basically did time on the clock, red dot versus LPVO, same drills, and the LPVO was slower for him. And I think this video, I don't know, I'll check later, but it's probably got, tens of thousands of views on YouTube. So that's tens of thousands of people who potentially buy into this notion that because he was slower with an LPVO, the LPVO is the reason he's slower. No, the reason he's slower is skill, right? It's a skill set issue that's costing him time, rather than if he were to adequately train back of an LPVO like countless competition shooters, right? You look at any of the top competition dudes, most are running LPVOs, most aren't slower with them, right? So if you're training in that kind of capacity, you're going to be just as fast with an LPVO as a red dot. Then too, there's the added benefit that if you're training back of an LPVO and you're able to find pretty much where you need to be, even 9 times out of 10, right? When you get back of a red dot, you're just gonna be far better off and far more precise with getting that connection to the gun that you need, right? Because another thing that's costing you is, all right, I can't find where I need to be back with the LPVO because something is off, either stock placement or cheek weld placement, more than likely. That means I don't have a good connection to the gun. That means I'm not able to manage recoil as effectively as possible, were I in a far better position. With that in mind, right, if you're trained up well enough to where you're just nailing that position that you need each time, the first benefit is you're able to find your sights, right? The second, and honestly the more important one, is you're then able to manage recoil much, much better than you were previously, because through the building of finding your sights better, you've built up a better mount, a more consistent mount, and you're just going to be more consistent when you're actually shooting. On the topic of recoil management, another reason why people might perceive that the LPVO is slower is the recoil management sucks, right? The gun is going every which way, and within the reticle, they're seeing that scope shadow appear because they're shifting back of the gun more than they should be. Versus with the red dot, they're not seeing that issue. So what that's telling them is there's something wrong that's costing them more time, and they wind up blaming the LPVO rather than their actual skill set. Just kind of how people work. The last thing they want to look at is themselves and an issue there. But that is an issue, right? If you have just shitty recoil management, you're going to wind up seeing scope shadow during recoil depending on the platform you're shooting. What it really comes down to is LPVOs aren't slower. It's a myth propagated by people who just happen to suck at shooting. So if you find yourself slower with an LPVO when you first get one over a red dot, what does that tell you? It should tell you that you just need to train more, right? Go dry fire, go live fire, get in the reps to get it just as fast as you are with a red dot. Otherwise, just stick with a red dot. If you're not willing to put in the work, a red dot is the optic for you. That should just about cover it. Any questions, drop them in the comments. I'll try and get the most of them. If you know anyone who thinks LPVOs are slower than a red dot, send this video to them. Send them to my page. Send them to the page of anyone who, shoots competition, shoots with an LPVO, and you can pretty easily realize that it's not any slower. It's a skill-based issue. And anyone saying that an LPVO is slower doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about, or just doesn't understand shooting in the way that they think they understand shooting. So get good, train up. See you guys next time.